The house was alive with laughter and clinking glasses, a symphony of celebration for what should have been the happiest night of my life. My graduation party. I had dreamed of this day for years, the culmination of late nights hunched over textbooks, of sacrifices no one else in my family seemed to notice. My parents had gone all out, crystal chandeliers twinkled above, silver platters held delicate hors d'oeuvres, and the air smelled faintly of roses and champagne. Friends and relatives moved like bright, animated constellations around me, their smiles reflecting the lights in the polished marble floors. And yet, as I stood there, dressed in a flowing gown that I had picked out months in advance, an unease gnawed at me. The celebration, for all its glitter and warmth, felt fragile. My father, in particular, exuded a subtle tension beneath his tailored suit and rehearsed smile. He floated among the guests, laughing at the right moments, shaking hands, raising toasts, but his eyes never lingered on me with pride. No, they held something colder, something calculating. Something that had nothing to do with my achievements. I had long known that my father's approval was a currency I could never earn, but tonight, seeing him hover near my champagne glass, I realized just how far his control extended. I caught the glint of his fingers as he deftly slipped a small, fine powder into my drink. My stomach sank, a twisting coldness spreading through me. Time slowed as the scene unfolded in slow motion, the swirling champagne, the sparkle of the bubbles catching the light, my father's expression, an almost imperceptible smirk hidden behind polite charm. I forced myself to breathe, to smile, because any reaction now would ruin everything. My lips curved into a practiced expression of delight as he raised his glass toward me, nodding in approval. I nodded back, eyes fixed on him for a heartbeat too long. He didn't know that I saw. And he never would. The room seemed oblivious to the tension threading through the air. My friends clinked their glasses together, a chorus of congratulations ringing around me. My mother fluttered nearby, giddy with pride, oblivious to the subtle storm brewing under the surface. My heart thudded in my chest, a chaotic rhythm of fear, anger, and something darker. Something that felt like the first sparks of resolve. I walked through the crowd, letting the warmth of admiration brush past me, letting their smiles wash over me like sunlight. But beneath the surface, my mind churned. Betrayal. The word echoed in my head, loud and bitter. My father, my own father, had planned to ruin this moment, to sabotage the one night that was supposed to belong entirely to me. And yet, as I watched him mingle with distant relatives, the weight of his malice began to crystallize into clarity. I knew I had to be careful. Any rash movement could destroy everything. But I also knew that I could turn this. If he thought he could poison my happiness, he had underestimated me. The idea came quietly at first, a whisper in the back of my mind, perhaps I could let this act of betrayal speak for itself. Perhaps I could show him, in a way he would never anticipate, that I was no longer the obedient, naive girl he had tried to mold. As I lifted my glass to my lips, the golden bubbles reflecting the chandelier above, I let the smile stretch across my face, radiant and serene. I did not drink. Not yet. Instead, I held the glass carefully, letting my fingers brush against the smooth crystal, and allowed my gaze to drift toward my sister, who laughed at a joke I did not hear. The plan was forming, subtle and slow, a quiet storm that would change everything. Tonight, they all believed they were celebrating my success. But in that moment, I realized that I had the power to rewrite the evening, and perhaps, even my future. My sister was laughing when I saw her, standing near the dessert table, a perfect vision of effortless charm. She wore a dress that shimmered in the warm light of the chandeliers, her hair falling in soft waves around her face. She looked like someone the world had bent its rules for, never a struggle, never a doubt. And for my father, she was everything I was not, compliant, gentle, easily molded into the image he desired. I should have felt jealousy, a familiar sting that had been with me since childhood. I should have resented her for being the favored one, the one who needed no armor to navigate our father's cold, calculating gaze. And sometimes, I did. But tonight, as I watched her chat and laugh with our guests, I felt something else, a quiet, burning clarity. My father's betrayal had shifted something in me, awakening a dark spark I had kept hidden for too long. I drifted closer to her, careful to appear casual, to let my smile remain effortless. My heart thudded against my ribs, a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. I knew the powder was in my champagne glass, that my father had intended for it to ruin me, to humiliate me in front of everyone I cared about. But as I watched my sister raise her glass to my father in a toast, my mind settled on a plan that was both cruel and precise. I had always been careful, always calculating, always seeing the strings that my father pulled behind the scenes. I knew my sister's routines, her habits, the small ways she trusted the world without hesitation. And now, the same instinct that had kept me cautious for years whispered in my ear, if he wanted to harm me, I could turn it around. Not with brute force or shouting, but with subtlety, with elegance. I approached her, my steps light and deliberate. "Here, let me pour you some champagne," I said, my voice soft, melodic, filled with a sisterly warmth I had perfected over years of practice. Her eyes sparkled as she smiled, oblivious to the storm behind my calm demeanor. "It's your favorite, right? Just like Dad likes it?" She leaned closer, laughing again, and I felt the first pangs of guilt, sharp and immediate. I was about to give her something meant for me, something that could hurt her. But the guilt was tempered by clarity, the knowledge that my father had spent years controlling, manipulating, and belittling me. He had turned love into leverage, and now, finally, I held a measure of power. As I poured the golden liquid into her glass, I felt the smooth touch of the crystal against my hands, the bubbles sparkling in the light like tiny stars. My heart raced, my mind calculating every possibility, every consequence. My sister lifted the glass in a toast, her eyes bright with affection, and I mirrored her smile perfectly. To anyone else, it would have seemed a perfect moment of familial love and celebration. But beneath the surface, the balance of power had shifted. I watched her sip, the liquid sliding past her lips, unaware of the danger she had just embraced. My chest tightened, a strange mix of dread and satisfaction coiling inside me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, not just to survive, but to assert that I was no longer a pawn in my father's game. As she laughed again, tilting her head in her perfect, charming way, I allowed myself one fleeting thought: I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was making a statement. And when the night ended, when the champagne glasses were empty and the guests had gone home, no one would doubt who held the power. Tonight, the room seemed brighter than ever, filled with laughter and clinking glasses, yet for me, everything had narrowed to a single, taut line of tension. I watched my sister lift the champagne, the golden liquid catching the light like a promise of celebration, and I felt my chest tighten with a complicated mixture of dread and anticipation. The powder meant for me now sat inside her glass, invisible, silent, but the consequences of its presence pulsed through my mind like a slow drumbeat. For a moment, I allowed myself to step back, pretending to mingle with the guests, letting my face wear the mask of joy and excitement I had perfected over years of careful observation. But my eyes never left her. She laughed at a joke someone told, tossing her head back in carefree delight, and I felt a sharp pang of guilt twist inside me. Was this truly revenge, or was it something darker, something I wasn't prepared to name yet? The first sip passed without incident. Relief and fear collided within me, a confusing storm. The powder, I realized, would take time, its effects subtle at first before crescendoing. My father, who had watched me carefully, expecting a moment of triumph when I faltered, looked puzzled now. His brow furrowed as he followed my gaze, trying to discern what had just occurred. I could almost hear the cogs of his mind turning, the disbelief that his plan had somehow missed its mark. Flashbacks washed over me, memories of years spent under his watchful, manipulative gaze. I remembered the subtle put-downs disguised as advice, the endless comparisons to my sister, the way my achievements were minimized or quietly overshadowed. And yet, despite it all, I had survived, carefully, quietly, learning to see the world with eyes sharp enough to spot betrayal before it struck. Tonight, all those years of silent calculation were coming to fruition. I moved closer, my steps measured, my heart a drumbeat in my ears. My sister laughed again, completely unaware of the danger she had ingested. She was the picture of innocence, trusting and unguarded in a way I had once been. And yet, even in her blissful ignorance, she was now a part of a lesson I was determined my father would finally understand. I allowed my mind to wander briefly, imagining the confrontation that would come later. The powder would make its presence known soon enough, a subtle collapse of equilibrium, and my father would finally see what he had done, not just to me, but to the people around him. The power dynamic, carefully maintained for years, was shifting, and I was no longer the helpless daughter. A ripple passed through my sister, a brief cough that drew the attention of nearby guests. My pulse spiked. She waved it off with a laugh, blaming a tickle in her throat, but I knew the change had begun. Every moment that passed now was a delicate dance between control and chaos, a test of my ability to navigate the storm I had set in motion. I stepped back, allowing myself a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The room remained oblivious, my father still pretending that everything was proceeding according to his plan. But I had disrupted it. The smile on my face was small, almost imperceptible, a shadow of triumph hidden beneath carefully maintained composure. As I watched her finally lower her glass, a pang of guilt shot through me, sharp and bitter. She was my sister, the person I had loved all my life, and yet tonight she had become a symbol of my father's cruelty, and my refusal to be victimized any longer. Revenge was sweet, yes, but it carried a weight I had not fully anticipated. The first tremor of consequence passed quietly, and I knew more would follow. The night was far from over, and neither was the reckoning. I had taken control, and in that act, I had declared my independence, not just from my father, but from fear itself. Tonight, the game had changed. And I would never be the same. The room had quieted now. Guests milled about, some whispering in concern, others oblivious to the subtle chaos that had begun to ripple through the evening. My sister leaned against the wall, pale and trembling, and for the first time I saw her not as the perfect golden child, but as a person caught in a web spun by my father's cruelty, and now, by my careful hand. My father's face was a mask of confusion and disbelief, the cold smirk I had always known replaced by something rawer, something vulnerable. He searched my eyes, looking for a hint of weakness, a flicker of fear, but found only calm. The realization must have hit him slowly, the plan he had orchestrated, the subtle humiliation he had intended for me, had backfired entirely. And the irony, sharp and almost poetic, was not lost on me. I stepped forward, letting my gaze sweep the room, letting the weight of the moment settle over everyone present. "It seems," I said softly, my voice steady, "that the evening has taught us all a lesson." I didn't need to say whose lesson it truly was. My father's eyes narrowed, the tension between us thick enough to taste. The guests, sensing something extraordinary unfolding, fell silent, their attention drawn to the quiet storm in my presence. I glanced at my sister, who now looked at me with a mixture of fear, confusion, and, slowly, a dawning understanding. She realized that she had been part of a larger reckoning, one she had never anticipated, and yet she sensed the truth of my words. This night was not just about her, or about the powder in her champagne. It was about exposure, clarity, and the unveiling of a long-hidden reality. My father opened his mouth, perhaps to defend himself, perhaps to assert control, but I was faster. Years of observation, of careful calculation, had brought me to this moment. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to strike, the power had shifted simply because I had chosen it. His manipulations, his favoritism, his cold, controlling hand, everything had been revealed in the quiet, devastating simplicity of truth. I thought about the years I had spent under his shadow, the endless comparisons, the subtle cruelty hidden beneath polished smiles. And I realized something fundamental: I no longer needed his approval. I never had. The powder, the betrayal, the danger, it had been a catalyst, a moment of reckoning that forced me to recognize my own strength. My sister, recovering her composure, finally met my gaze. There was fear there, yes, but also an unspoken acknowledgement. We were both products of the same family, shaped by the same manipulations, but tonight, I had chosen to act, and in that action, I had reclaimed not just my power, but my voice. I turned my attention fully to my father, who now seemed smaller somehow, stripped of the authority he had long wielded like a weapon. "You underestimated me," I said quietly, letting the words linger in the air. "And in doing so, you reminded me that control is an illusion. Power is not given, it is taken." The tension was electric, and yet beneath it all was a strange, liberating calm. I had faced betrayal, I had confronted danger, and I had emerged with clarity. Tonight was not just a celebration of my academic achievements, it was a declaration of self-possession, a symbolic act of emancipation. I raised my own glass, the champagne sparkling in the light, a quiet toast to my own survival, my own agency. The room seemed to exhale with me, the weight of hidden truths finally released into the open. I was no longer the girl living in the shadow of my father's manipulation. I was whole, and I was free. As I walked toward the door, leaving the hushed whispers behind, I felt a profound sense of closure. The night had tested me, had demanded cunning, courage, and a willingness to embrace the darker corners of human emotion. And in passing that test, I had discovered a truth more valuable than